They weren't masterpieces from the start. They were stitched together in the shadows, cut by cut, frame by frame. Some films reach greatness through vision, others through pain. These are the ones that stumbled out of production broken. Half-finished scenes, jarring performances, storylines that made no sense. Action films with million-dollar explosions and zero emotional firepower. Studios called for reshoots. Test audiences walked out in confusion. Directors stepped back. Deadlines loomed, and in the quiet behind locked doors, a different kind of hero entered the room. The editor, armed not with cameras or scripts, but with instinct, rhythm, and blades. Editors turned chaos into clarity. They found performance in discarded takes, momentum in awkward transitions, and in some cases, entire character arcs that were buried under bad pacing were resurrected with nothing more than a hard drive and a deadline. These weren't just edits, they were resurrection. Movies you remember for their pace, their tension, their iconic scenes might have never existed without post-production magic. This isn't a tribute to directors. It's a spotlight on the silent surgeons who turned wreckage into cinema. These are 15 Hollywood action movies that were saved in the editing room. Fucked Hekjane, Daken 2000. It was almost just another forgettable thriller. When the initial cut of Taken was screened, no one saw a franchise in the making. The story felt sluggish. The tension was uneven. The action sequences lacked impact. Even Liam Neeson's performance, quiet and calculated, seemed swallowed up by poor pacing and scattered structure. The biggest problem? It didn't build. Moments blurred. Emotional stakes got lost. That now iconic phone call? It barely registered in the middle of a longer, forgettable scene. But in post, the film was reimagined. The editing team stripped away the fat-cutting scenes, tightening transitions, rearranging the emotional beats. Action sequences were sharpened with rapid-fire rhythm, and the monologue, the threat that launched 1,000 memes, was extracted, elevated, and turned into the heartbeat of the entire trailer campaign. The version we know today wasn't just polished, it was rebuilt under pressure, and from the cutting room emerged a colder, leaner, meaner version of the film. That's when Neeson stopped being an actor and became a weapon. Fact#2, Mad Max, Fury Road, 2015. What do you do with 470 hours of footage and no traditional script? That was the challenge facing Fury Road's post-production team. The shoot had been chaotic, non-linear, shot by shot based on storyboards. Scenes existed independently. Characters shifted without clear arcs. There was no roadmap, just raw material and a vision. Enter Margaret Sixel. Rather than impose traditional structure, she leaned into the chaos. She found flow in repetition, emotion in silence, rhythm in mayhem. Her cuts didn't just connect scenes, they conducted them. The edit became musical violent, syncopated, relentless. Action wasn't simply assembled, it was sculpted. The result? A masterpiece of momentum. A story you didn't watch, you felt. And the Oscar-winning editor behind it didn't just save the film, she defined it. Fact#3, The Bourne Identity, 2002. This movie was supposed to launch a franchise. Instead, it almost didn't launch at all. When The Bourne Identity wrapped production, the signs weren't good. The ending didn't work. The pacing collapsed in the second half. Test audiences were confused. Studio execs were already bracing for damage control. But in the edit bay, a new version of Bourne began to take shape. Editors tossed aside entire subplots. They brought forward key scenes to clarify motivation. They cut dialogue that dulled the tension. What emerged wasn't just a cleaner narrative, it was a sharper, more dangerous Bourne. Crucially, they found a tone that didn't rely on high-tech gadgets or flashy cuts. Instead, the film leaned into paranoia, stillness, and quick, brutal violence. Suddenly, this wasn't just a spy thriller, it was something colder, more human, and with one ruthless recut, a franchise was born. Fact#4, Edge of Tomorrow, 2014. They filmed repetition. Post-production turned it into evolution. Edge of Tomorrow had one of the riskiest premises in action cinema, a time loop war story. But the early cut felt more like a video game on replay mode. Audiences didn't feel tension, they felt fatigue. The jokes fell flat, the arcs got lost in the cycle. Worse, the ending confused everyone. There was no closure, just noise. Then, the editors stepped in. They reframed the structure, treating each loop not as a reset, but as progress. They accelerated the rhythm, cut redundancies, moved critical emotional beats to the front. Suddenly, each repetition meant something, and the opening sequence, rebuilt to feel like a storm. You don't start with backstory, you drop the viewer into chaos. The final result was no longer a gimmick. It was a journey, and it only started working after it was torn apart and rebuilt. Fact 5, Rogue One, 2016. A film about rebellion nearly lost its own battle in the cutting room. Rogue One had the scale, it had the visuals, but its first cut lacked momentum. Characters drifted without purpose. The emotional spine was missing, and the finale? A blur of effects with no payoff. That's when the studio brought in Tony Gilroy. Alongside the editors, he didn't just adjust, he restructured. Entire arcs were redesigned, dialogues re-recorded, key scenes reshot. Jyn Erso was recentered as the heart of the story. Her decisions gained weight, her sacrifices earned meaning. And then came the Vader scene, an afterthought that became unforgettable. Rogue One isn't remembered for its polish, it's remembered for its presence. And that presence? It was built in post. Fact Route 6. Die Heart. 1988. It wasn't supposed to be a revolution. It was supposed to be a mid-budget action flick with problems. Die Hard had no locked tone during filming. Some scenes leaned too comedic, others too grim. Bruce Willis was known for TV comedy. Alan Rickman was a stage actor making his film debut. The early cut felt imbalanced fast, then slow, serious, then awkward. The editors gave it rhythm. They shaped McClane into a reluctant everyman, not a hero. They created contrast between moments of explosive violence and eerie quiet. They positioned Hans Gruber not just as a villain, but as a strategic mirror. Every pause was intentional. Every gunshot earned. The building wasn't just a set, it became a pressure cooker. And from that pressure came a blueprint for the next 30 years of action cinema. Fact numeral 7. Suicide Squad, 2016. What do you do when your movie tests badly? You let the trailer company edit it. The original cut of Suicide Squad was slow, disjointed, and bleak. Warner Brothers expected attitude. What they got was confusion. So, in a move almost unheard of, they hired the same team that made the upbeat trailer to recut the entire film. Gone were character arcs. In came pop music, rapid edits, and title cards. Scenes were chopped into flashy fragments. Transitions were cut like music videos. The result wasn't coherent, but it looked cool. The movie didn't get better, but it got louder. And for a generation of moviegoers raised on chaos and color, that was enough to sell tickets. Fact what? Salt tu siau teikas. When a movie changes its lead star and keeps the same script, something has to give. Salt was initially crafted for Tom Cruise, but when Angelina Jolie stepped in, the rewrite didn't go far enough. The result? A protagonist who didn't quite fit the beats written for someone else. The solution came in the edit. The team trimmed exposition, let ambiguity take the lead, and emphasized the quiet menace in Jolie's performance. Dialogue was stripped back. Visuals were sharpened. Her mystery became the film's fuel. The final version felt tighter, leaner, and more enigmatic. Because sometimes, less clarity equals more tension, and Salt didn't need to explain herself. She just needed to vanish. Fact numeral 9. Iron Man 2008. Improvisation is exciting until you try to edit it. Iron Man was famously unscripted. Dialogue was invented on the fly. Scenes evolved mid-shoot. The charm was real, but so was the mess. Without structure, the film wandered. Key themes lacked clarity. The emotional through line was buried. In the edit, everything changed. The editors imposed order-moving scenes to create arcs, dropping lines that muddled tone, and building a sense of cause and consequence. Tony Stark's transformation from arms dealer to hero became coherent. Even throwaway moments gained new weight. What started as scattered charisma became the beginning of a cinematic empire. Because sometimes editing isn't refinement, it's resurrection. Fact Hassan Zero, World War Z, 2013. When a blockbuster ends in disaster, sometimes the only option is to erase the ending entirely. World War Z had momentum until it didn't. The third act, set in Russia, was chaotic, confused, and emotionally flat. The action was loud, but the story collapsed under its own weight. Even Brad Pitt admitted something wasn't working, so they made a rare move. They deleted it. In post-production, the team rewrote and rebuilt a new ending, smaller, quieter, and infinitely more focused. Instead of explosions, we got tension. Instead of scale, we got stakes. The WHO facility sequence was shot like a survival horror film, tight framing, whispered dialogue, every sound weaponized. It felt like a different movie, because it was. And the edit didn't just patch a hole, it saved the entire film. Facta Sono, Mission, Impossible, Fallout, 2018. Too much action can kill a story, even when every shot is perfect. Fallout was a stunt showcase. Helicopters, rooftops, motorcycles, but the first cut moved too fast. The emotion didn't land. Audiences were impressed but not invested. In the edit, the solution wasn't more, it was space. Editor Eddie Hamilton slowed the tempo tempo in key scenes. He allowed tension to breathe. He let the silences linger before the fall, before the fight. The Paris chase was recut, not for speed, but suspense. Relationships were given room to unfold. The result? A film that felt more human than any entry before it. Because impact doesn't always come from what you add. Sometimes it's what you leave. Fact Hasontu 3002006. It didn't look like cinema until the edit told you it was. 300 was filmed almost entirely in front of green screens. The performances were big. The world? Non-existent. On raw footage, it looked like overacting in a vacuum, but the editing room gave it mythology. Color grading transformed sunlight into blood-red skies. Speed ramps turned fights into dances. The soundtrack surged with every sword swing. Editors embraced the unreality, crafting a heightened, hyper-stylized world where every frame looked sculpted. What was fake on set became real in post. And 300 didn't just become a movie, it became a moving painting. Fact Hasson 3. Speed 1994. It had the right idea, but the wrong energy. Speed promised relentless tension, a bus rigged to explode if it slowed down. But the early cuts didn't deliver. Scenes on the bus dragged. The stakes felt flat. The pulse wasn't rising. For a movie about velocity, it felt slow. In post-production, everything was recalibrated. The edit cut seconds like dead weight. Conversations were trimmed to half their length. Background sounds, engines, horns, tires were brought to the front of the mix, turning white noise into musical tension. Even Sandra Bullock's reactions were timed for maximum urgency. The bus didn't just move faster, it felt faster. The editing didn't just save the pacing, it turned the premise into propulsion. Fakt 14 Tango Cash 1989. This movie didn't find its tone. It found a way to make chaos part of the fun. Tango and Cash was a troubled shoot from the start. Clashing styles, a fired director, and a story that zigzagged between gritty crime and near-cartoon absurdity. The footage felt like it came from two different films. In the edit bay, that contradiction was embraced. Rather than smooth over the tonal gaps, the editors leaned in, punching up the action, exaggerating the humor, and letting the absurd moments play out like self-aware satire. Cuts were sharp, pacing was fast. Plot logic? Optional. What emerged wasn't elegant, but it was entertaining. And that messy, pulpy rhythm is exactly why people still remember it. Fact Hasson 5. The Matrix 1999. The ideas were dense. The execution was slow. When The Matrix was first assembled, its philosophy overpowered its pacing. Long explanations, heavy dialogue, scenes that drifted between action without momentum. The story was there, but the energy was buried. Editor Zack Steinberg brought it to life. He rearranged sequences to create buildup, inserted reaction shots to create urgency, trimmed dialogue that slowed the pace. Cross-cutting became a tool not just for clarity, but for pressure. And bullet time? It was edited with a metronome's discipline, each beat precise. The result wasn't just a smarter action film, it was one that moved like thought itself. A glitch in the system perfectly timed. Bonus fact: Justice League 2017. Not every movie is saved in the edit. Some are undone by it. When Zack Snyder stepped away from Justice League, he left behind hours of footage, unfinished effects, and a tone that was dark, operatic, and personal. Warner Brothers wanted something else. Something brighter, shorter, safer, so they brought in Joss Whedon. Scenes were reshot, dialogues rewritten, color grading lifted to artificial gloss. The editing team wasn't stitching, it was amputating. Emotional arcs vanished. Comic relief was pasted over grief. Continuity broke. Even Superman's face became a meme. The final product was a Frankenstein assembled, but soulless. Years later, the Snyder Cut emerged. Longer, heavier, but whole. Suddenly, what seemed like a lost cause became a case study in what happens when a film is cut to death. Sometimes, the editor saves the movie, and sometimes, the edit becomes the crime scene. You've seen what the camera captured, now you know what the editors created. Which of these transformations surprised you most? Which film do you see differently now? Tell us in the comments, and let us know what movie we should expose next. Behind the Velvet Curtain.